He was just an electrician, she a lonely widow. When she whispered, "Stay, maybe forever," he froze, and the world shifted on its axis. She whispered, "Stay, maybe forever." I froze. The late afternoon sun, a weak, diluted amber through the persistent haze of late autumn, struggled to penetrate the tall, narrow windows of the old Victorian house on Willow Creek Lane. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, seemed to press against the glass, making the already dim interior even more melancholic. Elias Finch at 23 felt the chill seep into his bones, despite the worn flannel shirt he wore. He knelt on the faded Persian rug in the spacious, somewhat cluttered living room, a toolkit spread open beside him, the cold steel of a wrench resting against his jeans. The antique floor lamp, a hulking brass beast with a frayed silk shade, lay disassembled around him, its wiring a tangled, confusing mess. He'd arrived an hour ago, summoned by a frantic, slightly breathless phone call from Cordelia Vance. He'd known Cordelia, or rather, known of her, since he was a kid. She was the widow of his father's old college friend, a man named Sterling Vance, who had passed away unexpectedly 2 years prior. Sterling had been a brilliant, if eccentric, architect, and the house on Willow Creek Lane, a labyrinth of angles and shadows, was a testament to his unique vision. Now, however, it felt more like a grand mausoleum. Elias's father, a pragmatic electrician, had often sent him on small errands, odd jobs for his less tech-savvy clients, and today Cordelia's flickering lamps had put her on his list. The urgency in her voice had been unmistakable, a tremor that hinted at more than just a malfunctioning fixture. "It just stopped working, Elias," she'd explained over the phone, her voice a low, almost husky murmur that seemed to carry an echo of something deeply weary, a quiet plea that went beyond simple repair. "And it's the only one that truly lights up this corner. I can't bear another evening in the gloom. Not another one." He'd promised to be there promptly, and now, amidst the guts of the lamp, he could feel her presence even before she entered the room. A subtle shift in the air, a faint scent of jasmine, and something else, something richer, like old books and quiet sorrow, permeated the space. He glanced up as she appeared in the doorway, framed against the soft light filtering from the hallway, a slender silhouette against the fading day. Cordelia was 42, but the years had etched themselves not in harsh lines, but in a profound depth around her eyes, a kind of elegant weariness that spoke of battles fought silently. Her dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was pulled back loosely, a few wisps escaping to frame her face, softening its aristocratic angles. She wore a simple, dark blue sweater that seemed to swallow her slender frame, and her posture, while graceful, held a slight, almost imperceptible curve, as if she were perpetually bracing against an unseen weight, a burden that had become part of her very essence. "Any luck, Elias?" Her voice, closer now, held a fragility that made him instinctively want to soften his own movements, to tread carefully. "Getting there, Mrs. Vance," he replied, his voice a little gruffer than he intended, a defensive mechanism against the unexpected current of empathy that had rippled through him. He focused on a particularly stubborn wire, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if the entire universe depended on this single connection. "Looks like a faulty connection in the base. Might need to replace the whole socket. It's a stubborn old thing." She stepped further into the room, her movements quiet, almost ghost-like, a presence felt more than heard. He felt her eyes on him, a gentle, inquisitive gaze that made the small hairs on his arms prickle. It wasn't accusatory or demanding, just profoundly observant. He was acutely aware of the dust motes dancing in the weak light that managed to pierce the windows, of the rhythmic tick of an unseen grandfather clock in the hall, a steady heartbeat against the stillness and the almost oppressive silence of the house, broken only by the soft click of his tools against metal. "Sterling always said you had a knack for fixing things," she mused, her voice barely a whisper, a distant memory playing on her lips. "He admired your father, too. Said he had hands that could coax life back into anything, even a broken spirit." Her words, though seemingly innocuous, carried an unexpected weight, a shared understanding of something beyond the visible. Elias offered a non-committal grunt, a slight flush creeping up his neck. He wasn't used to such personal observations from clients, especially not from someone like Cordelia Vance, who had always seemed to exist in a different, more refined sphere, a world of elegant sorrow and quiet dignity. He usually dealt with terse instructions, hurried payments, and quick exits. This lingering presence, this quiet observation, was unsettling, yet strangely captivating. It made him feel seen, in a way he rarely was. He finally managed to free the old socket, the brittle plastic crumbling slightly in his gloved fingers, a testament to its age and wear. He held it up, a small triumph, and then reached for the new one from his kit, a pristine replacement. As he did, his elbow brushed against a stack of meticulously arranged architectural drawings on a low table nearby. They shifted precariously, threatening to spill onto the faded rug. "Oh, careful!" Cordelia exclaimed, a sudden tremor in her voice, a flash of alarm in her eyes, and she moved quickly, her hand reaching out to steady the stack. Her fingers, long and delicate, brushed against his, a feather-light touch. The contact was fleeting, barely there, but it sent a jolt through Elias, a surprising electric current. Her skin was cool, almost icy, and yet there was a faint, lingering warmth that seemed to spread through his own hand, a strange paradox. He pulled back almost immediately, as if burned, his breath catching in his throat. She, too, withdrew her hand, her eyes widening slightly before she looked away, a faint blush rising on her pale cheeks. The air thickened, charged with a sudden unspoken energy, a palpable hum that vibrated between them. "Sorry," Elias mumbled, feeling absurdly clumsy, his words a tangled mess. "Didn't mean to—" No, it's quite all right," she interrupted, her voice a little higher than before, a brittle note of forced composure. She cleared her throat, then straightened the drawings with an almost obsessive precision, as if tidiness could restore order to an unraveling world. "They're just important. Sterling's last commission's unfinished. His final thoughts almost." He nodded, avoiding her gaze, his focus now intensely fixed on the new socket. He meticulously began to connect the wires, his movements precise, almost overly deliberate, each twist of copper a desperate attempt to regain control. The silence that descended then was different from the earlier quiet. It was heavy, pregnant with unspoken things, a delicate tension stretching between them like a taut wire. He could feel her presence still, standing just a few feet away, and an inexplicable warmth spread through his chest, battling the chill of the room, a warmth that was both comforting and deeply disquieting. It was an odd feeling, a pull he couldn't name, and it made him deeply uncomfortable, stirring something he wasn't prepared to acknowledge. He just wanted to fix the lamp and leave, to escape this charged atmosphere. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity, each tick of the distant clock amplifying the unspoken. He finished the wiring, reassembled the lamp with practiced ease, and then, with a hesitant breath, plugged it into the wall socket. With a soft click, the bulb flickered to life, casting a warm, golden glow across the corner of the room, banishing the shadows and illuminating a small dust-covered armchair and a collection of antique globes, each a silent testament to journeys taken and worlds explored. Cordelia gasped softly, a sound of genuine relief, almost a sob of quiet gratitude. "Oh, Elias, you did it! You truly did it! Thank you, truly!" Her voice was infused with a sudden, almost childlike joy that made her seem younger, less burdened, a fleeting glimpse of a different Cordelia. She stepped closer, her face now bathed in the warm light, and he noticed the faint constellations of freckles across her nose that the dimness had previously hidden, tiny maps of a life lived. He rose slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, and gathered his tools, a desperate attempt to create a sense of normalcy. "Just part of the job, Mrs. Vance." He tried to keep his tone neutral, professional, but his gaze kept snagging on her, on the way the light caught the silver in her hair, on the genuine smile that now graced her lips, a smile that radiated warmth and gratitude. She reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out a small, folded bill, crisp and new. "How much do I owe you?" "Just 35 for the part and labor," he said, taking the money. Their fingers brushed again, this time more deliberately, as she handed him the bill. He felt the same subtle jolt, the same unexpected warmth, a familiar spark. This time, neither of them pulled away quite as quickly. Her eyes, a startling shade of hazel, met his, and for a long moment, time seemed to stretch and thin, an elastic band pulled taut. There was a question in their depths, a hesitant vulnerability that mirrored something stirring deep within him, something he couldn't quite define but felt with a profound intensity. You won't believe who took his side. This is just the start. It gets stronger. Elias had intended to leave immediately after collecting his payment. His father, a man of strict routine and unwavering pragmatism, had a policy he'd instilled in Elias from a young age: in, fix, out. No lingering, no personal conversations beyond the bare essentials of the job. But as he turned to gather the last of his tools, stuffing the wrenches and screwdrivers back into their canvas slots, Cordelia cleared her throat. The sound was small, hesitant, yet it resonated in the quiet room, a subtle summons he found himself unable to ignore. "Elias," she began, her voice a little softer, a little more tentative than before, as if testing the waters. Would you perhaps care for a cup of tea or coffee? I just put the kettle on. It's already singing." He paused, his hand hovering over his toolbox, a wrench still clutched in his fingers. His first instinct, honed by years of training and habit, was to decline. Politely, but firmly. He had other calls to make, other errands for his father waiting on his cracked smartphone screen. Besides, a cup of tea with a client, especially this client, felt strange, uncharted territory, a crossing of an invisible line. But then he glanced at her, standing there in the warm glow of the newly resurrected lamp, her expression so genuinely hopeful, almost fragile, like a wilting flower in need of water. The thought of leaving her alone in the quiet, echoing house, now fully illuminated in that one corner, but still vast and shadowed elsewhere, felt unexpectedly sharp, a pang of something akin to guilt. "Just a quick one then, Cordelia," he heard himself say, surprised by the words, by the casual use of her first name, a boundary crossed without conscious thought. "I've got a few more stops before sundown." A small, genuine smile touched her lips, a radiant transformation that chased away some of the weariness from her face. "Please, just Cordelia, and thank you. Come, the kitchen is through here." Her voice was lighter now, almost buoyant. He followed her, his eyes taking in the details of the house as they moved through the long, shadowed hallway. Dust motes danced in every shaft of light that managed to pierce the gloom, highlighting the rich, dark wood of the banister, the overflowing bookshelves in the hallway, crammed with volumes that spoke of a life rich in intellect and curiosity. The numerous framed photographs that lined the walls, Sterling Vance, always smiling, always by her side, a phantom presence in every frame. The house felt lived in, loved, imbued with countless memories, but also profoundly still, as if holding its breath, waiting for something that might never arrive. The kitchen was surprisingly bright, a stark contrast to the rest of the house, with a large bay window overlooking a wild, overgrown garden, a testament to neglect. It was a comfortable space filled with the aroma of brewing tea and something else, something sweet, like cinnamon and apples, a scent that evoked warmth and domesticity. Cordelia moved with an unhurried grace, pulling down 2 porcelain mugs from a cupboard, her movements fluid and practiced, as if she performed this ritual 1,000 times alone. "Sugar?" "Milk?" she asked, turning to him. Her eyes, still holding that hesitant warmth, met his with an unsettling directness. "Black is fine, thank you," he replied, leaning against the counter, suddenly aware of the awkward length of his limbs in the cozy, feminine space, like a young colt in a china shop. He watched her, a strange sense of quiet contentment settling over him, an unexpected peace. It was a feeling he rarely experienced outside of his own small, familiar apartment, a sanctuary of noise and youthful chaos. She poured the tea, the clinking of the mugs against the saucer sounding loud in the silence, each delicate sound amplified. Then she turned, holding out a steaming mug to him, the fragrant steam rising between them. As he took it, their fingers brushed again, and this time the touch lingered, a soft, almost imperceptible caress, an acknowledgement. He didn't pull away, and neither did she. Their gazes locked, and the unspoken tension from the living room returned, amplified, a current, subtle yet undeniable, thrumming between them, threatening to ignite. "You know," Cordelia began, her voice a little breathless, her eyes still on his, holding him captive. "Sterling always said you were a kind soul. He saw it even when you were just a boy, helping your father. He said you had a quiet strength, a gentle spirit." Elias felt a blush creeping up his neck, a hot wave of discomfort, and something else, something unfamiliar. He wasn't used to such direct compliments, especially not from someone who felt so much older, so much more knowing, as if she could see right through him. He was just Elias Finch, a young electrician, certainly no quiet strength. "He was a good man, Sterling Vance," he managed, his voice a bit hoarse, a strange lump forming in his throat. "Always had time for a chat, always asked about my studies." She gave a faint, wistful smile, a ghost of a memory playing on her lips. "He did. He had time for everyone, maybe too much, but he loved his work, loved this house, and he loved life." Her gaze drifted away then, out to the tangled garden, beyond the window, and a shadow passed over her face. A fleeting glimpse of the pain he'd sensed earlier, a wound that clearly hadn't healed. He stood in silence, sipping his tea, the warmth of the mug a comforting anchor in the moment, a small shield. He wanted to say something, anything, to ease that unspoken sorrow, to bridge the chasm of her grief, but the words felt clumsy, inadequate, like stones thrown into a vast ocean. He was an electrician, a fixer of things, not of hearts. "It's very quiet here now," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper, pulling him back from his thoughts. Her eyes returned to him, holding a profound, almost aching loneliness, a desolation that felt too vast for one person to bear. Too quiet sometimes. The silence can be deafening. His chest tightened. He understood deeply the kind of quiet she meant, the kind that pressed in on you, that amplified every echo of memory, every absence, every unspoken thought. He thought of his own small apartment, often filled with the cacophony of his younger brothers, Liam and Owen, and their friends, a constant hum of life, laughter, and argument that he sometimes took for granted. Do you have family nearby?" he asked, the question escaping him before he could censor it. It felt too personal, too intrusive, crossing another invisible line. She shook her head slowly, a delicate sway. "Not close. My parents are gone. Sterling was an only child, his relatives scattered across the continent. Most of our friends, they've drifted away since he passed. Life moves on, doesn't it? The world keeps turning, whether you're ready or not." Her words were not bitter, just stated as a simple, undeniable fact, a quiet resignation. He nodded, a lump forming in his throat. The raw vulnerability in her voice, in her eyes, was disarming, unsettling. He was just a young man, still finding his footing in the world, still figuring out his own path, and here was this woman, older, more experienced, yet stripped bare by grief and loneliness, laid vulnerable before him. It was a disquieting inversion of the expected dynamic, making him feel both powerful and utterly helpless. She turned, then, to a small antique radio on the counter, its polished wood gleaming faintly in the dimming light. "Do you mind if I put on some music, just to break the silence a little? It's been too long without sound." "No, not at all," he said, relieved by the change of subject, by the sudden shift in focus. He welcomed the distraction. She tuned the dial, her fingers delicate on the knob, and a soft, melancholic jazz tune began to play, filling the kitchen with a gentle, soothing melody. It was the kind of music his own father occasionally listened to on Sunday mornings, a sound that evoked a sense of quiet contemplation, of introspection. Cordelia swayed almost imperceptibly to the rhythm, her eyes distant, lost in thought, a silent dance with memory. "This was Sterling's favorite," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the music, a secret shared between them. "He used to say it had a soul, that it understood loneliness, the deep kind of ache that words can't touch." Elias watched her, a strange mixture of admiration and something akin to protectiveness stirring within him. She was beautiful, yes, in a mature, understated way, the kind of beauty that transcended superficiality, but it was the quiet resilience he saw in her, the deep current of sorrow that she carried with such dignity, that truly held his attention, captivating him. "You know," she said, turning back to him, her eyes bright with a sudden, unexpected intensity, a spark of something he couldn't quite decipher. "You remind me a little of him. The way you focus, the way you're so meticulous with your work." He had that same quiet dedication, that same thoughtful concentration. The comparison coming from her startled him. He felt a profound sense of inadequacy. He was just Elias Finch, a young electrician from a working-class family, certainly no brilliant architect like Sterling Vance, no visionary. I just try to do my job well," he stammered, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks again, a flush of embarrassment. "That's all." She smiled, a knowing, almost teasing smile that held a hint of sadness, a shared secret. "It's more than just a job, Elias. It's a gift, to bring light back to dark places, to mend what's broken, to restore what's been lost. The words hung in the air, weighted with a meaning beyond the literal, a profound statement that resonated deep within him. He felt a sudden, desperate urge to reach out, to bridge the distance between them, to offer some comfort, some tangible reassurance. But he couldn't. He was a professional, a hired hand, and she was Sterling Vance's widow. The unspoken rules, the invisible barriers, were immense, insurmountable. "I should probably go," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth, dry and bitter. The light was fading outside, the day drawing to a close, and the thought of the traffic, of getting back to his own life, to the familiar noise and demands, felt suddenly unappealing, almost burdensome. "Of course," she said, her voice dropping, a flicker of disappointment quickly masked in her eyes. "Thank you again, Elias, for everything, for the lamp, for the tea, for the company. It meant more than you know." Her gaze lingered on his, a silent plea in their depths, a silent question. He nodded, unable to meet her gaze directly, and turned to leave, his feet feeling heavy. He was halfway to the door when her voice, soft yet clear, stopped him, freezing him in place. What happens now, no one expected, but it's what restores fairness. Elias stood in the doorway, his hand on the doorknob, the cool metal a stark contrast to the sudden, unfamiliar heat that had bloomed in his chest. He didn't turn around immediately, a strange, overwhelming hesitation gripping him, holding him captive. He felt as if a vital current had been cut, leaving him suspended in a breathless void, a moment outside of time. The soft jazz continued to play, a mournful, beautiful backdrop to the profound silence that had fallen between them. "Cordelia," he began, his voice rougher than he intended, a raw sound in the stillness, but the words faltered, caught in his throat. What could he say? What should he say? The polite goodbyes, the professional farewells, felt utterly insufficient, almost a betrayal of the unexpected intimacy that had formed, delicate yet undeniable, in the quiet kitchen. She took a slow, deliberate step towards him, then another, her movements unhurried, almost balletic, until she was standing just a few feet away, her presence a warm, magnetic force, pulling him closer. The light from the kitchen, though dim now with the approaching dusk, still caught the silver in her hair, making it gleam like moonlight, like spun silver threads. Her eyes, those captivating hazel eyes that held so much sorrow and strength, were fixed on his, searching, vulnerable, an open book. I just, she started, her voice a whisper, almost lost in the music, so fragile, yet so clear. "I just feel like I've been holding my breath for so long, Elias. For years, it feels. Since he left." She raised a hand, a delicate, almost hesitant gesture, her fingers tracing an invisible line in the air, and for a fleeting moment he thought she might reach out to him, might touch his face. But then her hand dropped, clenching slightly at her side, a fist against herself. And for a little while, tonight it felt like I could finally exhale. Truly exhale. Like someone had finally remembered to open a window in a suffocating room. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. He felt the pull, an undeniable force drawing him closer, threatening to shatter every professional boundary, every societal expectation, every invisible wall he had ever built. He was too young, she was too old. She was his father's friend's widow, a woman from a different world. It was impossible, wrong, forbidden, a dangerous dance on the edge of a precipice. And yet, in the hushed intimacy of that kitchen, with the jazz music weaving its melancholic spell, each note a tear shed for a forgotten longing, none of that seemed to matter. All that existed was the raw, aching vulnerability in her eyes, and the equally raw, aching desire to offer her solace, to somehow mend the invisible wounds that had burrowed deep within her. He took a small step back, an automatic, almost instinctual movement of self-preservation, a desperate attempt to maintain control. "Cordelia," he said again, his voice strained, thin, "I really should go. My father, he'll be wondering. There's a lot of work still." She didn't move, didn't respond to his words, as if they were merely empty sounds in the air. Her gaze remained locked on his, a silent challenge, a desperate plea, a silent conversation passing between them that transcended language. "Elias," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet each syllable resonated with astonishing power. Do you ever feel like you're just waiting for something? Something you can't quite name, but you know deep down it's meant to shake everything up, to crack open the rigid shell you've built around yourself." He swallowed hard, the dryness in his throat unbearable. He did feel that way. He'd felt it for months, for years even. A restless dissatisfaction with the predictable path laid out for him, the safe, familiar routine of his life. A yearning for something more, something real, something that would ignite the quiet embers within him, that would give meaning to the long, empty stretches of his days. He just hadn't expected it to come in the form of a beautiful, melancholic widow in a sprawling, silent house, a place that felt both foreign and strangely, terrifyingly like home. He started, then stopped, unable to form a coherent thought. What was the point of denying it? The truth of her words resonated with a painful clarity, a sharp, undeniable recognition. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely more than a breath, a raw confession ripped from his soul. "Yes, I do. More than you could know." A faint, almost imperceptible tremor went through her, a visible shiver of emotion. A flicker of something, relief or profound recognition, passed across her face, transforming her. And then her voice, so soft, so fragile, yet imbued with an astonishing power, a quiet authority that belied her apparent vulnerability, filled the silent space between them. Each word was a deliberate step, carving its way into the air, into his very being. She whispered, "Stay, maybe forever." I froze. The words hung in the air, suspended, heavy with meaning, shimmering like heat haze over a summer road. Elias felt as if the very air had solidified around him, trapping him in that precise, terrifying, exhilarating moment. His breath caught in his throat and his mind reeled, a thousand thoughts colliding, a cacophony of fear and longing. Forever. The word was absurd, terrifying, exhilarating, impossible. It was everything he shouldn't hear, everything he couldn't possibly entertain, a transgression of every unspoken rule. But it was also everything he secretly yearned for, a desperate whisper from the deepest corners of his heart. He stared at her, his eyes wide, searching her face for any sign of jest, any hint that she didn't mean it, that it was a cruel trick of the fading light. But there was only raw honesty, a profound vulnerability that laid her soul bare, exposed for him to witness. She was terrified. He could see it in the subtle tremor of her hands, the slight widening of her eyes, but beneath the fear was a quiet resolve, a desperate, undeniable hope, a flicker of defiance against the inevitable. His heart thundered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, overwhelming silence that had descended upon the house. The jazz music, though still playing, seemed to fade into the background, a distant murmur, drowned out by the roar in his ears, the frantic thrum of his own blood. He was 23, on the cusp of his own life, and this woman, 19 years his senior, marked by loss and solitude, had just uttered a phrase that felt like both a terrifying promise and a sacred curse. He didn't move. He couldn't. His body was a statue, rigid and unyielding, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, a battleground of desire and duty. Logic screamed at him to turn, to leave, to run from this impossible, dangerous closeness, from the precipice of something irrevocably forbidden. But something deeper, something primal held him captive, rooted to the spot, unable to break free. The silence stretched, thick and potent, filled only with the rapid beat of his own heart echoing in his ears. He saw the fear in her eyes deepen, a hint of regret, perhaps, for having dared to speak such a profound truth aloud, for having exposed herself so completely. She looked away for a brief moment, her gaze dropping to her hands, then back at him, her lips trembling slightly, a tiny tremor that spoke volumes. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he raised his hand. It was an involuntary action, a response born not of thought, not of conscious decision, but of an overwhelming, undeniable instinct, a primal need to connect. He didn't know what he intended to do, to offer comfort, to simply acknowledge her pain, to bridge the silent chasm that had opened between them. His fingers, still faintly smelling of metal and dust from his work, reached out hesitantly towards her. He didn't touch her, not yet. His hand hovered in the air between them, a silent bridge, trembling slightly, an extension of his own uncertain heart. His gaze never left hers, and in their depths he saw a mirroring of his own fear, his own confusion, and something else. A flicker of hope, fragile but tenacious, like a lone candle flame in a vast darkness. He took a breath, a deep shuddering inhalation that seemed to draw the very essence of the quiet house, of the fading light, of her presence into his lungs. The warmth from her, the gentle scent of jasmine and old books filled him, saturating every cell. This was not a physical desire, not in the simple, raw way he understood it. This was something far deeper, a resonance between two souls aching for connection, for understanding, for a release from their respective solitudes, a mutual recognition of shared loneliness. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement that felt monumental, world-changing, he lowered his hand, not away from her, but towards her. His fingers, still trembling, gently, almost reverently, took her hand. Her skin was cool, as it had been before, but this time there was an immediate comforting warmth that spread through his own palm, up his arm, and into his chest. It was a warmth that chased away the chill of the house, the persistent chill of loneliness, and the icy grip of fear, replacing it with something new, something fragile yet powerful. Cordelia's breath hitched. Her eyes, wide and luminous, met his, and he saw tears, unshed and glistening, welling in their depths, reflecting the dim light of the room. A single tear escaped, tracing a shimmering path down her cheek, a silent testament to a profound release. But it wasn't a tear of sadness, not truly. It was a tear of release, of recognition, of a long-held breath finally exhaled. He held her hand, gently, firmly, their fingers intertwined, a silent pledge. No words were spoken. None were needed. The silence, once oppressive, now felt like a sacred space, filled with the undeniable truth of their shared vulnerability, their shared longing. The lamp he had fixed earlier continued to cast its warm, golden glow, illuminating the corner of the living room, a silent witness to a moment that had irrevocably shifted the landscape of their lives, altering its trajectory forever. He had come to bring light back to a dark place, and in doing so, He had found something unexpected, something that trembled on the precipice of everything he knew. He was no longer just an electrician, and she was no longer just a client. In the quiet depths of that old Victorian house, something profound, and perhaps forever, had begun.